Hello media students, in this video I'm going to talk you through how to plan for a critique, which could come up in component 2 and it is one of the trickier questions that you might be asked. These are all the previous questions that have come up for this sort of type of question before. They've asked about previously Levi Strauss and applying to TV, Clay Shirky applying to online media, Curran and Seaton applying to magazines, Steve Neal applying to TV. Whilst all of those in their own right are quite tricky, one we're going to look at today is evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of Barth's semiotics theory applied to magazines. So all of these are questions that start with evaluate. So it's not a case of you having to shift the question to try and think how far that theory is doing something, because they are inviting you in your big idea to make a judgment about how useful is that theory applied to that product, to a large extent, to some extent, or to a lesser extent. So when you're thinking about how useful a theory is, think about how well it applies. Can you think of features that you can clearly link to that theory? If you can't really do that, or you can only do that in some instances, you might want to start linking to other theories, which they encourage you to do, to think about how useful they are. And think about the degree to which it applies today, and has that changed historically over time? So if you think about Curran and Seaton's profit and power theory, does that still apply to the magazine industry today, when you've got a huge amount of technology, which means that pretty much anyone could create their own magazine, and that has sort of democratized the power that people hold? Whereas when Vogue came out, was that necessarily the same? Could anyone just sort of create a magazine? The same with Todorov and TV. Todorov, again, is quite an old theory. Does that apply to modern TV if you think about the bridge and its use of flexi narratives? So how relevant is that today? These are all the things you want to be thinking about. Now, in terms of Barth's semiotics theory, it's a focus heavily on the text. So thinking about the symbols you're seeing, the signs you're seeing, the connotations and the meanings that are associated with those. So thinking about signifiers, how it constructs meaning, and also myth through naturalization just means if you keep seeing the same thing again and again, for example, a whiteboard pen, you're going to associate it probably with school. So it's a myth. It's not necessarily having to link to that, but we are naturally just used to making that association. But this theory is just heavily focused on the meanings of the symbols. It doesn't really focus on context, for example, genre expectations, and it doesn't really focus on the encoded message. So Paul McNamee, what message is he trying to put into the big issue, and how are people receiving it? So Hall's reception theory could be really useful to link into this question. So in my intro, obviously I've got to this point by looking at all the features first and linking in theory, but my intro is that Barth's semiotics theory is useful to some extent, but does not account for the producer's encoded message, genre conventions, or how the messages may be received. So in my first paragraph, I'm going to think about the symbols on the front cover of this anniversary edition. You've got the night sky, endless opportunities, the stars, the fact there's 5 of them, again, a 5-star review, the iconography of the font of the text that looks like 20th Century Fox. It looks like the Hollywood sign. It kind of looks glitzy and glamorous. So all of those things, okay, yes, it's useful because that all connotes success. Those are all signifiers connoting success, but it doesn't talk about the context of the genre of the magazine. It's a homeless magazine. The big issue is a social enterprise. So they're actually subverting conventions of magazines. There's no celebrity on the front cover. If you look at lots of other big issues, there is a celebrity on the front. So the fact that this magazine has chosen not to do that is subverting genre conventions, because it's showing you that the vendors are the stars. And that's not something you can necessarily get just from focusing on the signs. Again, with the contents page, there is a manifesto on the contents page. You'd normally expect to see that with a political party, not on a magazine sort of contents page. So thinking about the repetition of the Lexis We Believe and how it adds to that, and also Donato's feature as well, the fact that there is a whole feature on a man that most people have never or will never meet in their lives. It's not on a celebrity that some people know really well or would be well known in general in culture. So that's also really interesting. The reason I put paragraph 3 is because this is actually a comparison question, but I'm just focusing on one text today to kind of make it really clear how you evaluate, but you would be kind of writing 4 paragraphs, 2 on the big issue, and then for our school it would be 2 on Vogue. So my third paragraph, I'm going to talk about the editor, Paul McNamee. He's aiming it at all because anyone can buy the big issue. They're sold by vendors on the streets, but he does have a preferred reading, and that is probably taken by the average reader of the magazine. So statistically, the people that are most likely to buy it are in the ABC1 demographic category, and they are psychographically reformers. You know, they want to see change and they want to empower people to change themselves. They are the ones that are championing vendors. So think about the No Soggy Bottoms Here Rise Bakery feature article, how Graham and Paul are sort of empowered to go to another social enterprise that helps people learn cookery skills and be the judges and taste their cake. And you know, the allusion to the Great British Bake Off again is going to appeal to this sort of audience, which again, this theory doesn't necessarily account for. And finally, you know, the moving on feature, the fact that that spans across 3 pages, there's a heavy focus here on employment, getting people back into work. Is that trying to expand who might take a preferred reading? Because if you can see these people changing their lives around and contributing back to society, then actually that's a really positive thing. And again, this theory doesn't necessarily account for that when it's thinking about who might be actually coming across this magazine. So thinking about the moving on page, you've got Marvina Newton, you've got Joel Hodgson, you've got all these amazing people that have set up their own charities, are sort of campaigning against certain issues, are doing really well in the professional world, and how all of the different signs and symbols are being selected to show that. But whilst that is useful, you do need some more theory involved to make it fully useful. So that was a whistle-stop tour of how to evaluate a theory successfully, but hopefully that clears things up a bit for you. And now I would advise that you just sort of go through all the set theorists, apply them to all the different products in component 2, and actually just start working out how useful they are, because you could potentially get, you know, any of them come up for any of the set products, even if they don't really seem to make that much sense. The exam board could throw a curveball at you. So I would potentially make some evaluation mind maps and do it that way. And by doing that, you're actually really clearly revising the theorist as well, and you should hopefully feel like you know them really well.